In the spotlight tonight, dodging war. An estimated 125,000 Americans fled to Canada in the 1960s and 70s to avoid the military draft in the Vietnam War. Decades later, many of those men still live north of the border and say they still have no regrets about what they did. Here's ABC's Neil Karlinski.
Nestled in the mountains of British Columbia, the tiny city of Nelson seems lost in time. But among the organic food, marijuana, and easygoing attitudes is one of the Vietnam War's lingering wounds.
Are you a draft dodger? I would say more I'm a war resistor. I firmly believe that wars will end when men refuse to fight.
Jeff Mock runs a tofu business. He is one of the tens of thousands of Americans who fled to Canada during Vietnam, many to Nelson.
No regrets. Absolutely not.
Jim Holland left everything he knew back in Texas more than 30 years ago. He is not, he says, a coward.
When your own ethics dictate that you would separate yourself from your friends and your family, that's not cowardice. That's standing up for what you believe in.
Ernest Heikkinen is an artist and writer who, like many, has now lived in Canada longer than he lived in the United States. He remains bitter about the country he left and has never gotten over the war he wouldn't fight in.
I see Iraq as just a continuation of policy that began in Vietnam.
Northwestern University professor John Hagan wrote a book about this largely anonymous group.
This is the largest modern political outmigration from the United States, and it really stands out.
That is one reason some Nelson residents decided that 30 years later, they were a group worth remembering. The idea was a large bronze monument of a Canadian with outstretched arms greeting a man and a woman. Townspeople here and officials alike thought it was perfect until word trickled south across the border. The American Veterans of Foreign Wars was outraged.
I get myself into big trouble by saying I think it's a good idea. Yes, I do think it's a good idea.
Nelson Mayor Dave Elliott was flooded with hate mail.
This is nothing more than a slap in the face to me and all Americans. These men are not heroes, but they are cowards.
Organizers decided not to build the monument, but the town will hold Canada's first ever gathering of American war resistors next year. People here hope it will serve as a homecoming to a group of men who've spent the last 3 decades coming to grips with the one decision which changed their lives forever.
I'm very, very proud to be Canadian.
Neil Karlinski, ABC News, Nelson, British Columbia.
Of the 125,000 Americans who fled to Canada, about half returned to the U.S. when President Carter granted them amnesty in 1977.